So basically, yesterday I introduced you to this interface. I told you about the Object Explorer, which we have on the left hand side here, and we have a couple of objects here, like database, securities, and so on. And if I expand databases, for example, that is where our databases are kept. So these are the databases I have on this server. Okay, so we created this my test database yesterday. Okay, so I want to open the file we worked on yesterday. And this is the editor. This environment, this is the editor. This is where mostly we'll be working, we'll be doing our work. We'll be doing most of our work, we'll be typing our queries in this area. Okay, and if I run a query, a box will show at the bottom of the editor. With two tabs, one with the results set, and the other one with either a successful or an error message. So this is just a revision into what the things we looked at yesterday. So going forward now, I'm going to just go back a little bit, starting from database creation that we did yesterday. Okay, so yesterday I explained that what we have here, the /* is for commenting this / */. We actually have two types. This one, I didn't mention that yesterday. This one is a multi-line commenting comment, or multi-line commenting symbol. If I want to, if I want my comment to span multiple lines, as in this example, okay, I will use this * ***. But if my comment is just going to be on one line, I can use double dash. Okay, so every time I want to make another comment on a new line, I'll have to type that symbol again. Every time I go to a new line, I'll have to type that symbol again. So */ for multi-line comments, the -- for a single line comment. And we said the purpose of these comments is to documentation or for keeping notes. Anything you put inside these characters would be ignored by the database engine. So if I put the double slash before this query here, one thing you notice is that the color of the text has changed. So running this query will no longer yield or produce a result. The database engine will ignore it completely because I have commented it out. I have instructed the database engine not to evaluate it, not to execute it. So that is the purpose of comments. So usually programmers, developers, data analysts use comments to document their codes. And as it was said yesterday, for you to have, if I write a program, in the next 6 months or 1 year, coming back to the program may be a little bit difficult for me to understand if I did not comment it properly, if I did not put clear comment on each of the lines of the code. So putting comments on it will help me to understand what the code is doing whenever I come back to the the code or the query or the program. So I hope this gives us an understanding into what commenting is. Now, moving forward, we have the create database statement. The create database statement, the purpose is to create a new database. Okay, whenever you use this statement, you want to create a new database in SQL Server. This statement creates a new database, and optionally the files that will be used and their file groups. Okay, so the files and their file groups, these are beyond the scope of what we are talking about here. These are optional stuff that you may need to do as you advance in your journey of being a data analyst or somebody who writes queries. So the following example creates the MyTest database. This is the example. Running this query would create a database called MyTest. Here we have the create database. These are the keywords that the database engine understood. Whenever the database engine sees this statement, it's understood that it needs to create a database. And the name following database, or the text or the word following database, is the name we are giving to the database we want to create. In this case, the name of the database will be MyTest. And after that is a semicolon. In SQL or in Transact-SQL, semicolon is optional. I can decide not to put it, but it is recommended by Microsoft that you should always end your statement, a complete statement, with a semicolon. And finally, on this line, go here is to indicate that this statement has ended, to separate this statement from any other statement that comes after it. So I have already created this database yesterday. I will quickly run a drop statement to delete it, and I will recreate it. So I will say drop database. MyTest. Now, one thing I also need to mention is you'll notice that I always write the keywords in uppercase letter. Every keyword, every keyword that I've written is written in uppercase. This is just a convention. This is just a good practice, in Transact-SQL. It is not compulsory. Transact-SQL or SQL Server is case insensitive, which means it can either be in lowercase or in uppercase. okay, either in lowercase or in uppercase. Either case, it will work
Sentence
fine.
case.
You said what?
I need in sentence case.
Sentence case.
That's the first letter of the statement.
Okay, capitalizing the first letter of the word.
Each word.
You mean this? Yes, it is your choice. Since SQL Server is not making it compulsory on the case you should use, so you have freedom to use any case you like. Is that clear? So I'll go ahead and run the query. Okay, I have an error. It cannot drop database because it's currently in use. Okay, I would let me change the database. Okay, so I'll run the query again. So now I have message command completed successfully. So the database has been successfully deleted. Now I will create the database again by now. If you have multiple queries in your editor, okay, you should make sure you select the one you want to execute. If I run this query like this without selecting create, now what I want to do is I want to create the database again. But if I don't do that, I just run the query without selecting the one I want, SQL Server will run all the queries in the editor. So what it will do is, the first query is create the database. It will create it, then delete it, then create a table. And that will result in an error because there is, or it will create a table in another database. Okay, so let me show you that. Let me comment this part so that I have started the recording.
All right. You have to recap so that you can capture the one you just explained.
Okay, so basically here create delete the database. Okay, and I've also said that SQL Server is case insensitive. You can write it in any case, either uppercase or lowercase. But the convention among developers is to write your statement in uppercase. Okay, so moving forward, now we are going to create a table in the database that we have just created. Okay, so to create a table, we use the statement create table. This statement creates a new table in SQL Server. And the example we have below, the following example creates the employee table into the MyTest database with 6 columns. All right. So let me uncomment the query. Okay, so this is the create table statement. And here, this is the name of the table, dbo.employee. Now, DBO is what we call schema name, and this is the default schema name. And I explained that schema is a way of grouping your tables into various groups. You will have different departments: human resources, productions, engineering, IT, and so on. So schema is a way of grouping all the entities, okay, in each department, okay, under one group. Now, let me show you a typical example. In the AdventureWorks 2019 database, AdventureWorks 2019 database is a database that is representing a company, but not a real company, a fictitious company. It is not real. So if you look at the structure of the database, of the tables in the database, you see that we have logical groupings of the tables in the database. For example, this table, department, employee, department history, employee pay history, job candidate, and shift are all belongs to the human resources schema. Okay, so that's a way of grouping those related entities into one schema. Now, we also have another schema here, person, which groups all the related entities into that schema. So I hope this gives you a good idea of what is going on here. We also have production, and finally we have sales. So schema is a way of grouping your entities. Now, moving along, after the dots, now DBO in SQL Server is the default schema name. So we usually use DBO where we don't have any schema name in mind. And even if you don't put DBO, if you don't specify any schema name when creating the table, SQL Server is going to use DBO for you for your table by default. So we are just explicitly doing it here for clarity. Now, the name of the table is employee. Okay. Now, we have the columns. Parentheses. So now the first column here that is defined in the table is employee ID. That's the name of the first column. And now we said data type. Int is the data type here. And what is data type? Data type is the attribute of a column that determines the type of data that can be stored in that column. For example, here, int here refers to integer. Integer is under numbers, under numeric values. Okay, so this is indicating that this column can only accept numbers, only numeric values. You cannot enter characters. You cannot enter sentence into this column. Now, moving along, primary key here is indicating that this column, for every row of this column, the value, the data must be unique. For every row in this column, the value you entered must be unique. You cannot have same value twice. For example, in the first row, you have one. The second row, you have one. That the table, that column will not accept it. SQL Server will give you an error message if that happens. If you are trying to insert the same value to multiple times, more than one time, into this column. So that is the essence of the primary key. It enforces data integrity. It makes sure that no two values are the same in the column employee ID. And in SQL Server, in the theory of relational database, we have something we call normalization. Okay, so every table, every standard table that has to meet up with the conditions must have a primary key specified on at least one of its columns. So moving along, we have not null, another attribute here for the column, not null. Not null is each row in this column must you must enter each row in this column must not be empty. That is what not null is indicating there. No row in the employee ID column should be empty. You cannot insert an empty value into the column at any point in time. All right, then we have comma to show that another column is coming after that. Then the next column is first name, mvarchar. That is the data type for this column. Now, mvarchar here is indicating that this column can accept a set of characters, a number of characters. Okay. Anything that is within a string, the alphabet, a mixture or a combination of letters and numbers and so on, so can be accepted into this column. And I mentioned yesterday that we also have the other variant, which is varchar. But mvarchar accepts more characters than varchar. That is basically the difference. Now, in the parentheses here, we have 50. 50 is indicating the length of characters that this column would be able to contain, would be able to accept. Okay, so you cannot enter more than 50 characters into this column. And finally, we have not null in that column as well. All right, so the same thing for last name. And for gender, we have a little bit different attributes. Here we have nchar, or you might pronounce it as nchar. So this is going to let the column accept a single character. And indeed, we have specified the length of the character that will be accepted into this column, which is 1. And null here is saying that this column can be empty. So the database will not enforce it on the developer or on the data analyst to compulsorily enter a data into this column. If you enter a data into this column, that is fine. If you don't, it will still work fine because of the indication or specification of null here. And the same thing happens to salary. But a slightly different thing that we have here is the data type. Here, the data type says money, which allows the column to accept a monetary value. Any value that contains a currency symbol like dollar, pound, and so on can be accepted, can be entered into this column. Finally, we have department name, another column, which is the last column. And then we have the same set of attributes that we have looked at repeated on this column. And finally, we have a semicolon, and we can also put the go here. Let me also mention that the go is not compulsory. It is just a convention for Transact-SQL. For the standard SQL language, Go is not part of the specification. So I hope this gives you an understanding of what is going on here. Okay, I've indicated Go before. Okay, so any question?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
My question is, these specifications that were given to this table, is it necessary? If we don't give these specifications, won't it create all these columns?
Okay, what part of the specification are you talking about? Can you just...
Okay. For instance, now, this employee ID, we said integers, right? And that they must be primary keys and not null. If we don't specify it and we just say employee ID alone, does it mean that it will not accept whatever we put in that row under employee ID?
Well, these are the things that are optional. Okay, let me start from what is compulsory. You must specify a data type for any column. Because if you don't specify a data type, how does SQL Server know what kind of data can be accepted into that column? What kind of data can be entered into that column? So you must specify a data type for any column. Now, for primary key, not all columns uses primary key. You will notice that it is only employee ID that uses primary key in this table. So not all columns. Primary key is usually used for the ID column of the table to uniquely identify each entity, each row in the table. Because in a company now, no two employees can have the same name and the same last name, the same first name and the same last name, right? But no two employees would have the same employee ID. No two students would have the same student ID or student matriculation number or student enrollment number, right? So this is a value, this is an attribute that is unique to each person. So every table in SQL Server should have at least one of the columns in a table should have a primary key. Now, finally, you can decide to make that column a null or a not null. But for a column that is having a primary key on it should be not null. You should make it compulsory on that column to not accept an empty value, because if it accepts an empty value, the purpose for which you created that column in the first place has been defeated, right? If it is going to accept an empty value for any row, then how do you identify that, that row? So I hope this clears.
Okay, in essence, can we say this like a data validation in Excel? Kind of.
Did you say what? What did you say?
like data validation in Excel that we have, you know, specifying what must go into a particular row or column, you know, kind of validates the kind of values or the kind of informations that should go into a particular column.
Yes, yes, something like that.
Then I also want to
Specifying
ask, are these standard, these 50 characters and all that, could it be more or could it be less?
Yes, it can be more, it can be less.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, I want to drag us back a little bit. I was not there in the class yesterday. I just want to know how you got to this interface, like the class 1 SQL. How did you get to this interface that you are giving out query?
This, if you look at this command here, the command I am pointing out right now, new query.
Yeah, okay, sir.
That is the query you use, the command you use to create a new how do I call it now? That's the interface that you're referring to.
Okay.
Now clicking on it will just create a new one for me, like a blank document in Microsoft Word.
Okay.
Or a blank a new worksheet in Microsoft Excel.
Okay. So how do you not get 1, 2, 3, 4? Your own was up to like 10 or 20.
Yeah, I were you not in the class yesterday?
No, I was not.
Okay, so I showed you guys yesterday. I showed the people that were in class yesterday how to enable the line numbers. If you don't have it, you go to the tools menu. Okay, go to options. Look for Transact-SQL in the box that shows up. Oh, sorry, text editor.
Okay.
And then go to Transact-SQL. Okay, so on the right of the box, on the right side,
yeah,
you see line number. Check that box. Check the box and click on OK.
Okay.
All right, so now I'm going to select the query and I'm going to execute.
Sorry, sir. Hello,
Yeah.
sir.
Yes.
So you necessarily need to select the database where you want to create all this by the left-hand side. How does it know which of the database this new table is to be created?
Yeah. That's a very good question. I was about to mention that before I run the query. If I execute this query now, you notice that the database I have here in this box that I'm pointing at is AdventureWorks 2019, right?
Yes.
If I execute the query, this table is going to be created into AdventureWorks 2019 database, which is what I don't want. I actually want to create this table into my test database. So one way to do that, we have two options here. The first option is to come here to click on this drop down and then select the database that we want before creating the table, before executing the query. So I'm going to select my test. Okay, so that is doing it using the graphical interface. The other way is to use Transact-SQL to do that. So, and how do I do that? I can just anywhere in my editor, I can say use, and I'll specify the name of the database, use my test. Okay, so if I run this query, it will change the database from whatever it was to my test. I hope this is clear.
Okay.
So moving along, we can now that we have changed the database to my test, we can now select the query and then execute. So I hope we have we have all typed this query. Okay, so now I have successfully created the table. Now, if I refresh my Object Explorer and I expand my test database, the table should now be there. Now I have it, dbo.employee. If I expand that table and I expand columns, I would see all the columns in this table. All right. If I right-click on the table, I select it and I right-click, and I click on select top 1000 rows. That will execute a select statement, and the table will show in the result set with empty rows.
How do you now put data in the columns now?
We are going, we will get there. We are moving one step at a time.
All right.